If they disappeared without a word, and now you're stuck in that soul-crushing silence, I want you to hear me. It's not your fault. It's not because you weren't enough. It's because they are avoidant. But here's the deal. There's one sign they're coming back, and if you don't see it, they're not. Period. You've been replaying every conversation. You've been analyzing every text. You're looking for clues in the ghosting, the distance, the mixed signals. Stop. Avoidants don't operate on logic. They operate on fear, fear of intimacy, fear of losing control, fear of depending on someone. They don't disappear because they don't care. They disappear because caring terrifies them. When someone with an avoidant attachment style pulls away, it often feels deeply personal. You're left confused, hurt, and spinning in a storm of self-doubt. You start asking yourself, what did I do wrong? Was I too much, not enough? Did I push them away? And those questions eat away at you. But here's what you need to understand. When an avoidant detaches or disappears, it has very little to do with you and everything to do with how they experience emotional closeness. Avoidants don't leave because they stop caring. They leave because caring feels unsafe. For them, intimacy triggers alarms. When they start to feel close, vulnerable, or emotionally exposed, they retreat, not because the connection isn't real, but because it is. And that realness threatens their internal sense of control and self-preservation. Emotional closeness activates their deepest fears, losing independence, being engulfed, or not being good enough themselves. That's why they suddenly go cold after an amazing weekend. That's why they ghost right when things start to feel secure. It's not because you made a mistake. It's because their nervous system has been wired to see closeness as danger. And once that alarm goes off, they do what they've always done. They shut down. They pull back. They disappear. You might be sitting there thinking, but they told me they liked me. They opened up to me. We had real moments. Yes, that's true. But none of that means they're equipped to stay when the emotional stakes get high. You may have been emotionally ready. They weren't. And if you make the mistake of interpreting their disappearance as something you caused, you'll carry guilt that was never yours to begin with. What you were dealing with wasn't rejection. It was defense. A defense mechanism built over years, maybe decades. It might stem from childhood, from being let down or smothered by caregivers, or maybe from past relationships where vulnerability led to pain. Whatever the source, the result is the same. They leave first so they don't get hurt later. They withdraw so they can feel safe again. Here's the most painful part. They often don't even know they're doing it. Their distance isn't calculated. It's reactive. Their nervous system goes into lockdown, and the instinct is to run. They might rationalize it later. I just needed space. I was overwhelmed. I'm not ready. But in the moment, they're not making logical decisions. They're just trying to survive what they see as emotional overload. Now, here's where this becomes powerful for you. Once you truly accept that their behavior is about them, not you, you can stop carrying the emotional weight of their absence. You stop personalizing the silence. You stop blaming yourself. That's when healing begins. Because the truth is, you could have been the most patient, loving, grounded partner in the world, and they still would have pulled away, not because of anything you did, but because being loved in a healthy way feels unfamiliar, and unfamiliar feels unsafe to someone with an avoidant pattern. So instead of asking, why did they leave me? Try asking, what are they running from inside themselves? That shift in perspective saves you from spiraling. It lets you take back your power. You can't force someone to face what they're not ready to face. You can't love them into security. And you shouldn't have to shrink yourself just to be tolerated in someone else's fear response. That's not love. That's emotional self-abandonment. Let their silence speak for itself, but not about your worth. Let it speak about their readiness. Let it reveal what they're still not able to confront in themselves. That way you stop chasing answers from someone who can't even be honest with their own heart. And maybe someday they will come back. But if they do, it'll only mean something if they've done the work, if they've become aware of their patterns, if they've learned how to sit with intimacy instead of fleeing from it. Until then, remind yourself, their leaving wasn't about your value. It was about their fear, and that fear isn't yours to carry. If you're ready to stop settling and start rising in love, give this video a like. It tells me you're ready for the next level. Share your insights in the comments below. This is a space for bold, empowered women, and I'd love to hear your voice. And if you're serious about transforming your love life, make sure to subscribe so you never miss a chance to rise higher. When someone with an avoidant attachment style disappears or pulls away, it's incredibly confusing. One minute, they seem present, maybe even warm, connected, and emotionally available. The next minute, they're distant, cold, unreachable. It creates a cycle that leaves you feeling anxious, second-guessing everything you said, everything you did. And when they do come back, it can feel like a wave of relief. You think, maybe this time will be different, maybe they're ready. But this is where most people get stuck, confusing their return for growth. The truth is simple but hard to accept. If they come back and nothing's changed, then it's not a sign of love. It's a sign of the cycle. Avoidant partners often operate in patterns. Their emotional wiring is built around protect and retreat mechanisms. When things start to get too close, too intimate, too vulnerable, they pull away. When the distance gets too uncomfortable or the loneliness creeps in, they come back. This doesn't necessarily mean they've had a realization or done deep emotional work. It usually just means they're oscillating between their fear of intimacy and their fear of being alone. So when they reach out after going quiet, what most people want to believe is they've missed me, they've changed, they're finally ready. But if they haven't faced the root of their avoidance, if they haven't developed emotional awareness or tools to regulate intimacy, then it's not a return, it's a reset. They're just repeating the cycle. And here's the most important part. It will happen again. The warmth will return for a while. Then slowly, subtly, the distance will creep in again. And before you know it, you're right back where you started. Confused, hurt, waiting for answers from someone who's emotionally unavailable. This cycle is seductive because it plays on hope. You feel seen again, wanted, and that temporary reconnection floods your nervous system with relief. But that relief is short-lived when it's not backed by real change. You don't need just a return, you need a transformation. That's the difference between healing and repeating. What does real change look like? It looks like them acknowledging the space they created. It sounds like, I realize I pushed you away, and I want to understand why I do that. It looks like effort to sit in uncomfortable emotional territory without shutting down or fleeing. And unless that effort is present consistently, not just in words, but in behavior, then the return isn't growth. It's a cycle dressed up in nostalgia. Many avoidant individuals don't even recognize their own patterns. They may truly believe they just needed space. They may not realize how their absence impacted you. And if you keep accepting the cycle without demanding clarity or consistency, you're reinforcing the idea that they can come and go without accountability. That's not a relationship, that's emotional limbo. It's hard because you probably saw something real in them, a soft side, a wounded part they only shared with you. And that's why it hurts so much, because you know there's more underneath the surface. But knowing someone's potential isn't the same as living in their reality. And if they're not doing the work to break their own pattern, then you need to be the one who does. That means breaking your pattern of waiting, hoping, and accepting emotional breadcrumbs. You're not asking for too much. You're asking for something real, something stable. And if they can't offer that, you owe it to yourself to stop mistaking emotional inconsistency for passion. Stop mistaking a return for resolution. Because love doesn't just come back, it shows up, it stays, it works through the fear instead of running from it. So the next time they come back, don't just ask, are they here? Are they different? Are they aware of their cycle? Are they showing emotional accountability? Are they actively trying to connect instead of protect? Because if not, if everything feels familiar, then you already know where this story goes. And maybe this time you choose not to go with it. Maybe this time the pattern breaks because you break it. And that, more than their return, is what sets you free. When someone you care about pulls away and then eventually returns, it's natural to feel hopeful. You want to believe they've had a change of heart, that the time apart gave them clarity, that maybe finally they've realized what they're about to lose and they're ready to fight for it. But here's the hard truth. If nothing inside them has shifted, if there's been no self-reflection, no accountability, no real transformation, then it's not a comeback. It's just a cycle repeating itself, a loop, in one that can keep you emotionally stuck for months, even years. See, avoidant individuals often operate in these emotional loops. They fear intimacy. So when things start to feel too close, when emotional vulnerability is on the line, they shut down, they retreat. They convince themselves that needing someone is weakness or that closeness is dangerous, so they disconnect, sometimes with silence, sometimes with conflict, sometimes with a vague excuse like, I just need space. And if you're the one on the receiving end of that, you're left hurt, confused, and desperate for closure. But here's where it gets tricky. After a period of separation, they often come back. They miss the connection, the comfort, the emotional safety you provided. They want to feel that warmth again. But they still don't want the vulnerability that comes with it. So what do? They return just enough to keep the bond alive, but not enough to truly build anything. And if you're not paying attention, it's easy to mistake that return for progress. But real progress looks different. Real progress feels different. It doesn't come with the same hot and cold behavior. It doesn't keep you guessing. It's consistent. It's accountable. When someone is growing, they don't avoid hard conversations. They lean in. They don't keep disappearing and reappearing like emotional clockwork. They start showing up in real time with presence, with honesty, and with awareness of the damage their past behavior caused. That's why you need to pay attention to patterns, not promises. When someone returns after ghosting, ignoring, or shutting you out, don't listen to the sweet words. Watch what they do. Do they acknowledge the distance they created? Do they take responsibility for the confusion, the pain? Or do they act like nothing happened? Like you're supposed to just pick up where things left off? If it feels familiar, if it feels like you're tiptoeing around the same emotional landmines, then it's not healing. It's habit. And habits don't change until someone becomes radically honest with themselves. Avoidants who aren't self-aware are just recycling the same avoidance tactics, hoping the outcome will magically improve. But the truth is, no relationship can grow in a climate of fear and inconsistency. You can't build connection where there is no emotional safety. This is where your power comes in. You have to be the one to break the loop, because the person with the avoidant attachment often won't. Not unless they've done the deep, uncomfortable inner work to understand why they run, and most haven't. That doesn't make them bad people, but it does make them unreliable partners. And the longer you stay caught in the cycle, the more it erodes your own sense of self-worth. Because every time you accept their return without a change in behavior, you're sending a message that you're okay with inconsistency, that your needs can wait, that your emotional stability is negotiable. And over time, that message doesn't just go to them. It starts to program. You begin to question your standards. You start shrinking yourself just to avoid rocking the boat. And before you know it, your boundaries have quietly disappeared. That's why it's so important to stop romanticizing their return. If they haven't done the work, if nothing has changed, then what you're experiencing isn't love. It's emotional repetition. And repetition is the enemy of growth when it comes to healing from attachment wounds. You deserve more than a relationship that only survives in the in-between moments, the highs between disappearances. You deserve someone who can sit in discomfort with you, someone who doesn't just come back but shows up differently when they do. That's the real sign of change. That's the real measure of love. So next time they return, ask yourself, is this a beginning or just the same ending all over again? Because if it feels like deja vu, it probably is. And maybe this time you choose differently. Not because you stopped caring, but because you finally started caring about yourself more. When you're stuck in an emotional push-pull with someone who keeps coming and going, it's easy to believe that you're waiting on them to change, waiting on them to grow, waiting on them to finally show up consistently, to stop running, to be who you know they could be. But the truth is, you're not really waiting on them. You're waiting on a different version of yourself. One who no longer tolerates inconsistency, one who no longer accepts breadcrumbs, one who no longer confuses being needed with being loved. That's where the real transformation begins. When we attach ourselves to avoidant people, it's usually because there's a part of us that's still trying to earn love, to prove our worth. And avoidants are the perfect match for that wound. They activate it because they give us just enough to keep us hooked, but not enough to feel secure. It mirrors something we might have learned early in life, that love is something you have to work for, chase, earn, or even suffer for. And when you don't get it, you think if I just hold on a little longer, if I'm just more patient, more understanding, more forgiving, then maybe they'll stay this time. That mindset traps you in a loop, not just with them, but with your own patterns. You keep shrinking yourself, silencing your needs, calling it love when it's really emotional survival. Every time they leave and come back, and you accept it without question, you reinforce the belief that your needs are too much or that your standards are flexible. And over time, that chips away at your identity. The version of you that waits, that accepts the bare minimum, that holds space for someone who refuses to grow, that's not the real you. That's the wounded you. That's the part of you that fears if you finally ask for more, they'll leave for good. But here's the thing. If someone walks away because you ask for clarity, connection, or consistency, they were never staying for the right reasons anyway. Waiting on someone to stop being avoidant while you keep abandoning your own boundaries is a form of self-betrayal. It looks like loyalty, but it's really fear in disguise. Fear of being alone, fear of letting go, fear of starting over. But you can't heal while clinging to the person who keeps hurting you. You can't grow by staying small, and you can't find peace in the same place that stole it. That's why the shift has to come from within. It's not about getting them to change. It's about becoming the version of you who no longer tolerates their lack of change. And that version of you, she's not desperate. She's not confused. She's clear. She knows her worth. She doesn't need to chase love. She becomes it. She doesn't need to beg for consistency. She requires it. And if someone can't meet her there, she lets them go with grace, not guilt. Think about this. What if the real test isn't whether the avoidant comes back? What if the test is whether you still accept them when they return with nothing new to offer? That's the moment that defines the future, not theirs, but yours. So the next time you feel tempted to wait for them to call, to text, to figure it out, ask yourself, who am I becoming in this waiting? Am I growing or shrinking? Am I empowering myself or exhausting myself? Because love should never feel like endurance. It should feel like expansion. This journey isn't about fixing them. It's about freeing yourself from patterns, from pain, from the illusion that if you just hold on longer, love will finally feel safe. Safe love doesn't make you beg. It doesn't confuse you. It doesn't disappear when things get deep. It stays, it grows, and it meets you where you are, not where it left you. So no, you're not waiting on the avoidant to come back. You're waiting on the moment you decide that your peace, your voice, your needs are no longer optional. That's the version of you who ends the cycle. That's the version of you who never has to beg for love again. When someone with an avoidant attachment style walks away, it can feel like your entire world pauses. You start watching the door, checking your phone, holding your breath every time a message notification pops up. You become hyper-focused on whether they'll come back, what they're thinking, what you could have done differently. It's exhausting. But the truth is, the moment you stop watching for their return and start watching your own rise, that's when everything changes. Because healing doesn't come from their return, it comes from your reclaiming. Most people spend so much time hoping the avoidant will come back that they don't even notice what's happening to them in the process. You lose pieces of yourself, you lose sleep, you lose clarity, you start second-guessing your intuition, your needs, your worth. You convince yourself that if they just return, everything will make sense again, that the ache will stop, that the uncertainty will dissolve. But that's the illusion. Their return won't fix the confusion because the confusion started with their inconsistency. And if someone's presence brings chaos, their return doesn't equal peace. Peace comes when you stop outsourcing your worth to someone who couldn't hold your heart with care. Peace comes when you realize you don't need them to come back to feel whole. You need to come back to yourself, to the version of you who remembers who the hell she is. The version who doesn't beg for clarity, doesn't mistake mixed signals for love, doesn't make excuses for absence or label inconsistency as just how they are. Chooses self-respect over false hope every single time. It's not easy. You'll still think about them. You'll still wonder if they're thinking about you. But the difference is you don't let those thoughts run the show anymore. You notice them and then you return to you. You go back to building the life you want. You stop performing emotional CPR on someone who keeps pulling the plug. You stop checking their social media and start checking in with your own healing. You stop waiting for their text and start writing your own comeback story. Because here's the truth. Every time they left, you survived it. Every time they ghosted, pulled away, gave you silence when you needed presence, you made it through. That wasn't weakness. That was strength. And strength doesn't mean pretending it didn't hurt. It means you hurt and still chose to rise, still chose to heal, still chose. The real win isn't whether they return. It's what you do with the space they left behind. Do you fill it with anxiety, self-blame, and desperation, or do you fill it with growth, clarity, and boundaries? That choice defines everything. Because they might come back, they might not, but you can't tie your peace to someone else's emotional maturity, especially when they've shown you more than once that they can't meet you at the level you need. And if they do come back, you're not desperate anymore. You're not waiting. You're evaluating. You're grounded. You're asking, is this good for my soul? Not, will this stop the ache? You're no longer trying to fit yourself into a connection that requires you to abandon who you are just to keep it alive. That's what real healing looks like. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's not about revenge or proving them wrong. It's quiet. It's powerful. It's you choosing yourself in 100 small ways every day until one day the idea of settling for anything less than consistency and care becomes completely unthinkable. So no, you don't need to watch for their return. You need to witness your own rise. Watch how you start trusting your intuition again. Watch how your standards evolve. Watch how your boundaries get stronger. Watch how you stop chasing and start attracting. That's the real comeback. That's the version of you who doesn't just survive heartbreak. She transforms through it. Because love isn't proven by who comes back. It's proven by who stays, especially when things get deep, uncomfortable, or messy. And if they couldn't stay, let that be their lesson. But your lesson? That you are not someone to be circled back to. You are someone to rise from. Watch that version of you unfold. She's unstoppable. If you're done begging for clarity, done shrinking for someone else's comfort, and ready to break the cycle once and for all, then it's time. Time to choose you. Time to rise. Stop waiting for their return and start building the version of you that never has to beg for love again. Hit that follow. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And take your power back. starting now.